Hey, thanks for tuning into my podcast. This is Big Head on the Block, hosted by me, Tim Henderson, aka Big Head. Hey, welcome back to Big Head on the Block. I really appreciate all the listeners. I appreciate all the feedback and encouragement that I have been getting. Today, I have an in-studio guest, retired homicide detective, Lieutenant John Norwood. Welcome, John Norwood.
Thank you, Brother Tim, for having me here.
We're really glad to have you, and I'm sure our listeners are going to get some good information here. So tell us a little bit about your background. Obviously, you retired BRPD. When I was a young cop, you was already hired here. So give us a breakdown of what year you started. Okay. I know you were in uniform patrol, and then your time after that.
Well, Tim, I joined the Baton Rouge City Police Department in 1987. In April, to be exact, and got hired on in the 52nd Academy. After the academy, I went to uniform patrol for about 12 years. I was in uniform patrol, and I love uniform patrol because we get, as you know, we get a chance to do a whole bunch of stuff.
That's right.
All the barking dogs, the family fights, the jumping the fences, and going out after bad guys. So it was really fun. However, by the time I was in, I guess you say tenured in the police department, I started looking, what else is there I can do at this department? And I really started looking into the detective bureau. And I prepared myself for this, and I say I prepared myself because when I was, prior to being a police officer, I was in the Marine Corps. And
I saved, just to stop you for a second, I saved all the Marine jokes till at the end of the podcast because I was in the Army.
Good deal. So yes, sir. So anyway, but while in the Marine Corps, I started going to school and I started pursuing my studies in law enforcement. And so, and after getting out of the Marine Corps, I continued my studies at Sun University. And ended up getting my associate degree in criminal justice, and then went back and got my bachelor's in sociology, and of course, and did other things to prepare myself. In uniform patrol, Tim, this is what I perceive, and you may have saw this yourself. So, in uniform patrol, as I said, we do a variety of stuff. We did a variety of stuff, and one of the things that we did, as you can remember, when there is a crime scene where, especially, where there's a homicide that's taking place. So it is a uniform patrol guy job to come out to the scene, see it, and back all the way many, many feet away from everything and put up yellow crime scene tape.
Right.
And maintain order and also man the perimeter.
Right, to preserve the evidence.
To preserve the evidence. Now, even more so, this is what I paid attention to. I paid attention to the fact that when we uniform patrol guys put that yellow crime scene tape up, now we get on the phone and call guys, on the radio and call guys, and guys come out to the scene wearing coat and ties. And it is your job and mine as a uniform patrol guy, when those guys get out to the scene, is to promptly acknowledge them, and when they walk up to the scene, to give them our name, rank, serial number. No, not really.
Right.
But to lift up that crime scene tape, yellow tape, and allow them to enter into the crime scene zone.
Right.
Now, I personally never knew what happens on the inside of the crime scene tape.
Right.
Once I put that tape out and allow those guys in, that's the extent of my job. I wondered, I said, what do they do on the inside of that crime scene tape? So I became curious as to what they did. So that kind of got me more and more curious about going into the homicide division.
Okay. So you retired in the homicide division, or you made rank and retired shortly thereafter, or what?
Well, I went after 12 years. I applied to homicide division, got it on the second try. Went in And I actually was a corporal, went into the homicide division, and I made sergeant while I was in there. And several years later, I made lieutenant. So I went from a just a detective to a supervisor in the homicide division,
Right.
and then as a commander of the homicide division, where I retired as a commander back in 2015.
Nice. Great great background. Great guy. For those listening, I knew John when I first started in '96, and had the privilege of actually going to some calls with him when I was a young cop, and he was a little seasoned veteran. So for the listeners, this podcast is a follow-up on the Coffee with a Serial Killer, where I gave you some insight into Sean Vincent Gillis and how we as cops interacted with him, drank coffee with him, shot the breeze with him.
Right.
And if you had the opportunity to listen to that today, if you hadn't had the opportunity to listen to it, go back and listen to it, and then come back to this one. Basically, the time we were interacting with him was during the 1994 to 2004 era, which is the time that he was purportedly killing. And for those not familiar with Sean Vincent Gillis, an article described him as an American serial killer who is a sex offender who stalked and murdered 8 women between 1994 and 2004 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So, John, we know that he was arrested on April 29th, 2004. But what I'd like you to do is give us a lead in and tell us, while everybody else was asleep in Baton Rouge, April 29th in the wee hours around 1:30ish, tell me where you were, and tell me where the rest of the homicide division for East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff Department and Baton Rouge City Police were.
Yes, sir. Well, it was a dark and stormy night. Not really.
Sounded good.
Yeah. But no, seriously, yes, it was in the wee hours of the morning. I'm talking about, when I say we, I'm talking about EBR Sheriff Department deputies, Baton Rouge City Police, homicide guys, and also EBR homicide guys, as well as LSP homicide guys.
Okay.
And then because we did have a search warrant and an arrest warrant for Sean Vincent Gillis, we also had SWAT team out there from both the city and the EBRSO. And so I remember those guys. They were there to take care of business. In other words, they were there to get this guy who we know responsible for at least 3 murders and possibly more, as you said.
Right.
So on that particular wee hours of the morning, the SWAT team or the SCAT team, I think they call it SCAT team at the EBR. So they did their job, and they did their job well.
So whenever they made entry for the search warrant, it was a no-knock search warrant?
No-knock search warrant, yes, sir, right. Because this guy was by this time, he was, it was probable cause to believe that he had killed, like say, 3 women and possibly more. So no-knock search warrant. So EBR leading the charge, hit the house. I say hit the house. I'm talking about, with the ram.
With the ram,
the door comes open, the flashbang is thrown inside, and there is percussion grenade goes off and it's lit up, and now those guys rush in and they grab our prime suspect, Sean Vincent Gillis.
So was Sean Vincent Gillis in the living room, bedroom, or how did that transpire? Do you know?
Well, let me tell you this. My personal recollection is, first of all, we, the detectives, we'll wait until the SCAT team or the SWAT team go in and secure the suspect. So,
right.
So once they secured the suspect, which is Sean, then they call us in. So when I walked in the door, I immediately noticed 2 things. Well, besides the smoke, and from the percussion grenade,
right,
and the smell. But I noticed 2 things. I noticed this man who not a really big bad guy. You think about a guy who killed, you accuse him of killing 3, possibly 8
people.
And more people. You think about a big, bad-looking guy. Well, this guy was nothing. He didn't fit the description of a what we call a big,
Right.
killer.
He's
fact,
not the one that you perceive when you see
no.
that, hey, this guy's a killer, and maybe that's why he didn't come on our radar whenever we was hanging out drinking coffee with him.
Exactly.
So what was the two? What was the two things? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. What were the two things?
Yeah. Well, the two things I noticed. Well, first of all, Sean looked like a mild-mannered janitor to me.
Right.
I mean, he was physically, shaking like a leaf when I encountered him. When he, of course, he was in handcuffs by the time I got in there, and he was looking around as if he was bewildered. He's like, "What is going on?" And then the other thing I noticed immediately, I stopped and I began to look around in the living room where we was, at least anyway, and I will tell you that this room is filled from the top of the ceiling to the molding on the floor with Star Trek memorabilia. Now, I would not have paid attention to that except for the fact that I am a big, huge Trekkie. I've been watching Star Trek since 1960s.
Wow.
When we had floor model TVs.
So it benefited you in two ways. You get a serial killer and you get to view the Star Trek merchandise. That's
exactly.
Yeah.
And look, I'm going to live ahead. I'll tell you this, and I told Sean myself from my mouth to his ears once we kind of got over, the hump of him, doing these killers. I say, Sean, man, you and I could have been best buds. I say, here it is. We're both Trekkies. We could have been best of friends. With the exception of the fact that I'm a cop and you're a killer.
Yeah. So
he got a kick out of that, by the way.
Yeah, and that's pretty wild, man. So as you're in the house, you see him, he's shaking. Would you say that he's bewildered, as was your word, but would you say that there was some fear? Did he look like he was scared at all, or how would you? I mean, you're an expert in body language, and you probably can give us an assessment of how he, what his behavior.
Well, for a guy who's been accused of murders, and we had strong probable cause to believe he committed these murders, physical evidence that linked him forensically to these murders. And this guy.
That was 3 different murders that he was forensically linked to.
That's right. At that particular time when we kicked the door open. And the look on his face, like, how did y'all catch me?
Wow.
Yeah. It's like he is shaking. He looked like he's afraid out of his skivvies.
Right.
I mean, he's looked like, man, I cannot believe that this is happening.
So a guy that was a predator, a deviant, a killer, was standing there shaking because he was on the other end of the behavior that he thought he was a predator, but now he was the prey. And that pretty much sums up to me what you describe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. He looked as if this is a something that should have never happened, because I have been very careful to take care of keeping myself in these crime scenes in a way that no one would know that it's me. They'd never suspect me.
Right.
How did they come to the point where they discovered me?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So just real quick, going back in time a little bit, had he been questioned formally prior to y'all kicking in the door that night?
Well, he was contacted.
Okay.
Because and
without getting too deep into it, he was contacted and
he was swabbed.
Okay.
All right. Because of what the task force was tasked to do. He was one of the people that was swabbed during the process of the task force job.
From what I remember from interviews that I've seen, he was talked to, and then later when he was forensically linked to the crimes, y'all got the warrants, the search warrants and the arrest warrants. But y'all, up to that point, he never made any confessions. I guess is the easiest way to put it, right?
No, sir.
Okay, so
none whatsoever.
He denied everything. So y'all have him in custody. You see all the Star Trek memorabilia. I knew his wife, Terry.
Mm-hmm.
She was in the house, correct?
She was in the house.
Okay. I'm guessing she was in handcuffs and was brought in.
Yes, sir. The both of them, because they were in the house together in the place where we discovered the killer. So yes, they were both put in handcuffs and both taken down to the station.
And what was your role, either at the crime scene, or did you transport? Did you meet him back at the office? What was your role at that point, as y'all have the place secure? And I'm guessing crime scene probably showed up. So
yeah.
What was your role at that point?
Well, my role was to, number one, identify, first of all, that this is the guy we're looking for. So, so we was able to identify him, positively as the person we're looking for, and
right.
place him in handcuffs. And once that happened, I was also part of the team that transported him from his house downtown to the sheriff department's office to be interviewed, for his crimes.
I'm pretty sure on one of the I can only see from the back, but you're a muscular guy, and it looked like you were one of the ones participating in unhandcuffing him in the interview room and maybe resecuring him.
Yeah. There's several of us. Well, myself, Rudy Babin, Brian White, and there's a couple other names escape me, but we were all part of the interview
Todd
process.
Morris?
Todd Morris was there, yes, sir. Yes,
Rob
sir.
Gann, maybe? Was he there or no?
I think he was. I can't say for sure because memory don't serve me, but I think
right.
maybe he was there too as well.
Okay. So now we have Sean Vincent Gillis in custody.
Mm-hmm.
We have him at EBR Sheriff's Department because they think that he committed crimes in both jurisdictions, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so the three cases that were linked were Catherine Hall, Johnny Mae Williams, and Donna Bennett Johnston.
That's correct.
Okay. How many of them were in the city limits? Do you remember?
Well, I know for a fact that Donna Bennett was outside of the city because that was the last case that he did prior to his being arrested. I want to say Johnny Mae was inside the city and also Catherine Hall was inside the city, as memory serves me.
Okay. Let's go back to 1999. Okay, so we gave the viewers, or the listeners, I should say, we gave the listeners some insight as to what happened on that date, April 29th, 2004. Let's go back to 1999 when you went into the homicide division. Now, as a street cop, I started in 96. So I hear the chatter. Unfortunately, there's always dead bodies when you're in an inner city. You hear about murders. You don't, as a street cop, you don't necessarily focus on one more than the other.
Right.
You just try to develop information if you can.
Right.
So 1999, as a street cop, I'm hearing things that are going on. Obviously, you become a homicide detective. Now, as you say, you're on the other side of the crime scene tape. There were a lot of murders that were happening with, you would call, and I would call maybe high-risk individuals.
That's right.
But at that point in time, did y'all have any clue that anything odd was occurring in the city of Baton Rouge or the surrounding areas?
Well, as you said, I went in homicide in 1999, and almost immediately I was made aware of there were high risk, what we determined to be high risk victims who were being targeted and killed by an unknown suspect or perpetrator.
So just for our audience, and we can't give specifics because, we don't really know, but high risk would mean possible drug activity, possible prostitution, possibly homeless type females, maybe?
Yeah, all the above. It's the people who are kind of like if something happens to them, they seemingly won't be missed by people in society. But we all know that that's not true because
Right.
every victim is important to those guys who are beating the street in the homicide division to go and try to solve a murder.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, seemingly, yeah, that is the case.
So basically, if one's missing, maybe there's no family members that's gonna even try and report her missing or anything. So that's kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about high risk. But back to what you were saying, you were informed in '99 of these events occurring.
That's right. That's right. And so, and almost immediately when I hit the ground, hit the ground rolling in the homicide division in '99, within a year, I got one of my first cases, and the case was Shirley Michael. She was a victim who was a high-risk victim who was killed and left posed in a park off of North Street. And so as we began, and I say we, I'm talking about detectives in homicide division, began to investigate, we call them bodies on the ground. And what happens is these are victims, high-risk victims who are now being found in different parts of the city. We began to see similar modus operandi.
And for those who don't know that are listening, it's typically referred to on TV as MO. It's just something that says the same type crime with the same type elements of the crime are occurring. Unless you can give any better description than that, we'll stick with that.
No, that's you're exactly right, Tim. So in being a little bit more specific about the cases that we were encountering, for instance, we would come upon a body nude with the exception of a bra that's still fastened in the rear. If it was a fasten or if it even wasn't a fasten, still the bra was still on the body and there was no other clothes on the victim. And usually, when we found these victims, the bra was usually just pushed up above the breast.
Okay,
And
so the breasts were exposed.
Yes, sir.
They just So yeah, that's kind of that would be an MO. If somebody does the same thing repeatedly, that would give even an untrained investigator an idea that maybe this might be the same person, because that's kind of odd behavior.
Yeah.
I mean, the killing is odd enough, but just to leave them with the bra above with the breast exposed and leave that as the only stitch of clothes on there, that's pretty unique as far as crime scene.
Yeah.
So what did y'all do when you realized that, hey, maybe we have somebody that's involved in multiple killings?
Well, what happened is a very unique thing that happened, and I'll kind of give you a little background to understand what I'm getting ready to say. So, as most people are aware, city police department work cases and are police primarily inside the city limits. The sheriff department takes up their calls just outside of the city limits and beyond.
And for those listeners who may be from other states and other countries, East Baton Rouge Parish is where the East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff Department works. Baton Rouge City is contained within the parish. So the city officers, which John and I were, our jurisdiction, unless we're in hot pursuit, our jurisdiction is within the city limits. The Sheriff Department doesn't handle calls in the city for the most part. They handle it in the parish. Now, they do have jurisdiction, so they can handle the calls in the city if they want. So just to clarify for those people who may not understand that concept.
And you're very good, Tim. So and what happens typically is if there is a murder and the murder is inside of the city limits, it is primarily and almost exclusively for the Baton Rouge City Police Department homicide detectives to work. And if a murder, if a body is found and body is found outside of the city, it is primarily the job of the EBRSO homicide detectives
Right.
to work that case. Now, but something really unique happened. We had starting to begin to discover through our investigations on either side that there were bodies that were found outside of the city limits. And we through investigation and follow up, we determined that the victims were taken from a place inside the city.
Okay.
And so there we now have what we determined to be a primary crime scene, which is where the first crime occurs. And
So-
then there's a secondary, or I say secondary crime scene where the body is possibly placed or dumped.
So at the secondary scene, you're saying that they're finding bodies in the parish. The
That's
crime actually happened in the city. So at the secondary scene, tell our listeners how you determined it's a secondary scene.
Okay.
Lack of blood, lack of other physical evidence.
Yeah. So when you're talking about, let's talk about the primary scene first, and then you understand exclusively what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a secondary scene. Primary scene is where we're going to find most evidence of the crime. You're going to find it's what we call an active crime scene. If there's a fight that's taking place, if there is a struggle that's taking place, if there was a gunshot that had taken place, you're going to find shell casings, blood splatter, bullets, things in disarray at that particular place. If it's a stabbing, you'll find that there's blood splatter on furnitures and walls and places like that. So there was a lot of activity at a primary scene. Now, when you go to what we call a secondary scene, what you'll find is just a body placed in a location absent of all of the dynamics to explain why is this person here and why are they dead.
Which typically in today's society, we just say the body was dumped. So that would be indicative of a secondary scene. Somebody opens the trunk and dumps the body out and rolls out.
That's right. And typically what you would find in a secondary crime scene, absent of all the things I talked about in a primary scene, is you will find drag marks where someone has driven a person or body to a location, taken it out of a car or out of whatever container, and pulled the body from one location to another. Or you'll see tire tracks of footprints, of a person of someone going in, and then you find a body, but you don't find footprints of the person who's lying there,
right,
leaving out.
Okay. So back in 1999, unlike today, police were territorial.
That's right.
So city police handle city police stuff, sheriff handle sheriff's department stuff.
That's right.
And it's not the case anymore because we collaborate on many things now.
Yes.
But tell us, and the reason I mention that is because I want our viewers to understand this is 1999.
Yes.
This is before CSI. You know, there were cell phones. They weren't prevalent. There was no social media. And police had a different mindset back then. So don't judge this on what's occurring today. Judge it on what happened in 1999. So y'all are figuring out together that, hey, we got crime scenes in the city and at least secondary crime scenes with bodies in the sheriff department or vice versa. So, what did, as a city police officer, what did y'all do as a homicide division?
Okay. Well, first of all, first and foremost, Tim, I'm just being honest, we had to get over our egos.
Right.
Homicide detectives in any area, in any department, they're just high-strung people. So we had to get over our egos first and foremost, and our territorials. And so once we got over that, then we started to sit down where we didn't sit down and talk before.
Right.
We began to sit down and talk and discuss our cases one to another.
Yeah.
And we found that when we began to sit and talk and discuss the details of our cases, we found that some of our cases that we were working independently of each other there were a lot of similarities. And so that began to start a dialogue between detectives in the city police department and detectives in the state police and the detectives in the East Baton Rouge Parish EBR. And so once we began to sit down and talk, and now we had to take the next logical course of action, and that was we started collaborating on the investigations, shared information on a weekly or daily basis. We began to have meetings, and in short, we formed what we call a temporary task force. Once we began to think that there was one perpetrator that we know of that was responsible for at least 3 bodies, now we began to formulate this task force, serial killer task force, to go after this guy, all of us together, because we both had common. The city police department detectives, homicide detectives had common interests, as well as EBRO had common interests in solving these cases. And so, yes, sir, we formed a serial killer task force.
All right. So at the time y'all were investigating these crimes, if memory serves me correct, there was inconsistent MOs, modus operandi. There were other bodies surfacing with different aspects of a murder happening. Did that kind of confuse y'all as detectives? Was it confusing that bodies were showing up, but the same type MO wasn't being used?
Yeah, it became evident to us that there were 2 types of profiles that we were looking at. We discovered it within our office because we looked at the fact that you had a person, a perpetrator, if you will, who were targeting high risk victims. And you remember what we talked about high risk victims.
Right.
Well, then later, as we began to expand and look at other cases, we began to see that there were what we determined to be low risk victims who were women who were targeted and attacked and killed as well. And it didn't really add up. The crime scenes didn't even they were not consistent crime scenes. And so we begin to think something is afoot here. So we had to dig deeper into our investigations.
So you got 2 different crimes or 2 different type murders occurring.
Yeah.
Y'all have a serial killer task force.
That's right.
Formed. Y'all are collaborating.
That's right.
At some point in time, did y'all say, hey, man, maybe, or go to the administration, however it works in homicide? I've never been in homicide.
Yeah.
Did y'all go to them and say, hey, we have 2 unique sets of crimes that are occurring. Maybe there's a couple of people, and should we notify the public? Because there was a lot of concern when these, as you call them, low risk people started getting killed. It was something that started kind of alarming people in the city. So did y'all ever go to the administration, or was a determination made?
Yeah, and let me tell you, our hands were forced, Tim, to be honest with you. Let me be clear. So when we're talking about low risk victims, we're talking about women who are working class citizens, and some in professional jobs, who are going to work and coming home every day, and they don't go out in the middle of the night, doing things that high-risk victims do.
Right.
So, in fact, these victims, we're talking about low risk, oftentimes were attacked in their own apartments and homes. So the handwriting was on the wall. We saw it, and administration, who was deeply involved in these cases, saw it as well. So, and we had to take a second, I guess, another course of action. So our departments collaborating together reached out to the FBI, and we got we brought in what they call a FBI profiler.
Okay.
All right.
So the FBI profiler came in, but what about the public? Did we ever say, hey, we believe there's a serial killer, or did we just say, hey, there's bodies that are coming up and that murdered, and we should, be cautious out there? So was it at some point in time? I know it happened, but around that time, did the administrations come out and say it?
Well, we did say it, but let me tell you something. This is typically of any city. No one, a sheriff or a chief, wants to come out to a city and say there is a unknown killer, a serial killer,
right, killing
women indiscriminately, and we don't have a clue of who it is. Now you're talking about mass panic.
Mass panic, correct.
All right. So our department heads got together, and for a while, we are investigating these cases, but they were a little bit apprehensive and reluctant to tell our public about a serial killer because of the mass hysteria that it would cause. And now, the minute you say it, now every news channel on this side of Mississippi is coming down here and put mics in the faces of the people who said it.
Right.
So they really didn't want that circus initially. So, but we knew we had to do something. So, we sort of kind of kept it on the wraps until so what the city did was, and I like what he did. They control the information until they can get ahead of what would number one, what would be said at the briefings, and number two, we had a plan of action.
Do you remember who actually came out in the press conference or whatever and said Baton Rouge is experiencing a serial killer? Was it BOPD or?
Well, it was a joint effort because, Tim, you're talking about once we've got our ducks in a row, we were ready to talk to the public. And then, like I say, I commend the chief and the sheriff at the time because they really wanted to control the flow of information to the point where they didn't want to, start mass hysteria in the city.
Yeah.
So they really got a plan together prior to going out and speaking into mics, and I commend them for that. So yes, it was a joint effort on a part of the sheriff and the city police chief at the time when we came out and informed the city.
So the profiler was here from the FBI.
Yes, sir.
You have two different types of crimes being committed. So tell me the at-risk victims, describe some of those crime scenes, and then describe the low-risk crime scenes and the differences in between each one. Okay.
Let me go specific on one of the cases that I actually worked, that we considered a high risk victim.
Okay.
And then I worked another case with some other individuals, which were considered a low risk victim.
Okay.
A case where there's a high risk victim, first of all, it's almost always going to be an outside crime scene. Usually in a public place that's secluded, because the perpetrator or the killer wants to do whatever he does to silence this victim and keep it away from the eye of the public. So it's usually done under cover of darkness.
Okay.
And then it's for shock value for when the sun comes up, bam, there's a body laying out there posed. So so now you have nude victims in an area where there could be trash dumped, there could be a playground or what have you. It's going to usually be a outside scene, and yeah. So that's and there's usually no indication as to what caused this person's death initially.
What about in those instances? Was there any sexual assaults that occurred during the murders?
Well, when you say sexual assaults, everybody, every homicide victim is forensically examined, transported and forensically examined at the morgue, and based on information that memory serves me, on the victims, on at least a couple of the victims that we worked high risk, there was no indication of sexual assault, and now we're looking for semen in the vagina, or saliva, somewhere around there. So we didn't initially find that on at least a couple of victims that I worked.
Okay.
Right.
So that's the high risk victims. Tell us about the low risk crime scenes and what the difference y'all were seeing.
So the low risk crime scenes, one of the ones was I had personal knowledge of is off of Stanford Avenue. First of all, it is a very affluent, very nice, well kept home and very nice neighborhood. All right. There is usually manicured yard, cars parked in the yard, and lo and behold, though, we get a call saying there is a victim who has been killed at a location. So when we immediately come up on the location, we don't necessarily see trash and and I mean it's a real well kept place. So now but you walk inside of the home, it's well kept home, nice furniture and stuff, but you got a dead victim in a bed, and you determine that this victim is a professional, works in the medical field, and she's been killed in her own bed.
And do you remember the name of this particular case?
Gina Green.
Victim?
Gina Green.
Gina Green. Okay.
Yes, sir. And so there is no reason for her to have been dead in her bed in her own home by an unknown perpetrator.
Right.
Now, one thing we have to do, especially when there's a woman there's a victim, a homicide victim, we have to implicate or exonerate the closest male figure to that female.
Right.
And we was able to do those things in our investigations. And I say do that, we was able to exonerate the closest male subjects to the victims that we had. And once you do that, once you're able to exonerate the closest male victims, i.e. boyfriend, husband, now you got to run, because you got an unknown killer out there who's came into this woman's sanctity. You think about your own home. Our homes, as I like to think of, as places of a sanctuary. It's a place of safety.
Right.
Who expect to have a perpetrator come inside of our homes, invade our space, and attack us in our own homes? In this case, that's exactly what happened to Gina Green.
Yeah, that had to be just extremely frightening for this poor girl. So what did y'all find? Did y'all find any sexual trauma here?
Yes, sir, we did.
Was she posed nude, or?
She was posed nude. There was evidence of sexual assault.
But let me ask you this question. going back to some of the earlier killings.
Yep.
Was the bra on?
No, sir.
Okay, so this is showing inconsistent behavior with previous murders. So
exactly.
Now y'all having to think,
yeah,
maybe this is involving.
Yeah, we having to dot our I's and cross our T's. We having to reevaluate. Could this be someone who, one, in the middle of his killing, perpetrator in the middle of his killing, all of a sudden changes MO?
Right.
That usually don't happen. If you read about serial killers and those
Right.
types, once they find a product that they can deliver and get away with over and over again, they don't change it. They stay right there with that same product. In this particular case, now they may evolve,
Right.
but in this particular case, we had to determine whether or not we had a perpetrator who has all of a sudden changed his whole modus operandi, and instead of going after high-risk victims, now he's all of a sudden going after low-risk victims in their homes, and where there was no sexual assault before, now he's actually sexual assault and raping them. There's a low probability that the person of the caliber of the first crime scenes where there's no sexual assault and now all of a sudden there's violent sexual assaults, it's a low probability that's going to be the same perpetrator. But we had to investigate it. We had to consider it, and we had to investigate it to its nth degree. And so we did.
Did y'all at any point in time pivot and say, "Hey, let's think outside the box. Let's just go under the assumption that we got at least two different people," or did y'all treat this Gina Green case as just a random killing and didn't put any emphasis into the serial killer component?
Not at all. Not at all. We put emphasis on she is in that era, the era where these women are being killed. Instead of an outside high-risk scene, she's now in a low-risk area inside of a home. But we still putting the same focus and emphasis on, could this possibly be, again, someone who has evolved? Could this be the same person? And of course, what happens in those sexual assault scenes, especially in the sexual assault scene, we're very, very meticulous in collecting DNA, and when I say DNA, I'm talking about blood, saliva, semen that's possibly left behind,
hair fibers,
any and all thing that can forensically link a suspect to a crime scene.
And because I was in uniform patrol, I didn't have a lot of experience with DNA at the time. In 99, say just 94 to 2004, the span of Sean Vincent Gillis's known killings, DNA was either in its infancy or very expensive and hard to get tested. Yeah. If I remember correctly, is that consistent?
You're absolutely correct, Tim. In that, first of all, it was in its infancy. There was only one, maybe two labs that was doing DNA back in the early years. So since that lab, one or two, had the monopoly on this product, they could charge anything they wanted to, and their price was astronomical. So if we working cases inside the city, if we thought we had a case that was DNA worthy, we had to go to our superiors and practically beg them to allow us to send off our DNA specimens or evidence collected, which we suspect we may find a DNA sample on. We had to practically beg them to send it out because, one, again, it was very, very expensive in the city. One DNA analysis could have a great impact on the city's budget. I'm talking thousands of dollars back then.
Just for one case.
Yeah, one case. And the second thing is, it took months to get the results back. So our department heads really had to really consider that and really evaluate, is it really worth it to do that on certain cases?
Okay.
And so,
and basically the city absorbs that cost, right? The city police at that point in time would absorb that cost, and you unfortunately there are budget constraints, and like I said, we're not talking about today where it's readily available. We're talking about in its infancy. So
30 years ago.
Yeah, whenever you talked about this one case, you and I have had a previous discussion of another case that you had some insight on, you had some knowledge, firsthand experience, or at least some knowledge, and I want you to tell our listeners about that case, who it was, and describe the crime scene, and then tell me which one y'all attributed this particular crime to. Was it the low risk or the high risk victimology?
Go ahead.
So you go ahead and run with the I can't remember the name.
So
Charlotte Murray Pace?
Charlotte Murray Pace, yes, sir. So and I along with other detectives in my department worked a young MBA student murder. And in doing so, once again, she lived in the LSU area, very nice, affluent area.
Was she close to the previous killing that we described, Gina?
Yeah, they were close. They were close and similar. That's
in proximity.
Right. Close proximity, yes, sir.
Okay.
So so the first thing a detective notices, he notices the surroundings when he comes upon a scene. So on this scene where we've been called out to a murder that has taken place in the LSU area, in the community near LSU, we notice manicured yards. We notice nice homes. We notice nice cars and just a nice surrounding. And so when you walk up into the residence where this murder has taken place, now there's a horrific scene inside of this home, which does not fit the area on the outside.
And we talking about Charlotte Murray Pace, right?
Charlotte Murray Pace, that's right.
She was young in age?
Very young.
In her 20s?
College student, I wanted to say in her 20s. She was an MBA student.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, if memory serves me, I want to say she was due to graduate that next semester.
Oh, wow.
Really, really close to graduation, yeah.
So when you explain to the listeners what the crime scene looked like.
Well, the first thing we noticed when we walked in the door was an active crime scene. Now, if you remember, during our initial talk, we talked about active. We're talking about, furniture knocked over. You're talking about blood splatter. You're talking about weapons. In this case, it was a weapon opportunity, which was iron that was left on the scene. It had blood and hair fibers on it. You got bed in disarray. Nothing in this home fits on the inside. What's been perpetrated on the outside. Nice manicured, place, right. And then you walk inside of the house and it's in total disarray.
So when you first walk in and say the living room area, I'm guessing is where y'all walked in.
That's right.
Did y'all see signs of struggle there?
We saw signs of struggle. Furniture knocked over. We saw broken glass. We saw items strewn out throughout the floor in the living room, and then it tried to track up into the bedroom and into the bathroom area.
So did y'all see a large amount of blood at that point in time, or was it mainly just a fight, struggle type survival instinct by this young girl?
Well, we saw the latter. There was blood on the scene, and it was what we call high velocity blood. And if you understand this term, this is our bodies are in a constant state of blood pressure. So there's pressure, pushing blood throughout the veins, and immediately when a vein or artery is nicked or cut, that pressure is now pushing the blood on the outside. So we knew that this attack had taken place inside of the home because we saw what appeared to be high velocity blood and blood splatter throughout this home.
Okay, so was there a large quantity of blood in the initial room that y'all went into?
In the initial room is the living room, and so if memory serves me, I don't remember a large quantity of blood in the living room. You have to walk through the living room to get into the bedroom, into the bathroom.
Right. Give me an idea of what y'all believe, and at some point in time, I'm sure y'all are able to prove happened. Tell me what this girl, what her mindset was when she realized she was being attacked. Give me some detail as to how her behavior was, even though she died, what she was able to accomplish. So start again right there. The perpetrator
gained entry.
Yeah,
gained entry to the home, and
gained entry with no forced entry is what you're saying.
I didn't see personally. I remember forced entry, into the home. That we didn't. If it was evidence, I don't remember evidence of a forced entry. And that being said, I don't believe there was forced entry. I believe that he gained entry access some sort of way other than forcing, like kicking in the door or breaking a window.
Coercion.
It may be coercion or something to that degree. But once the perpetrator gained access to the victim, we believe that something went awry almost immediately. And this victim, Charlotte Murray Pace, maybe saw that this was going to go south at some point. And she began to fight for her life because there's evidence from the living room of, when I say furniture knocked over, I'm talking about furniture knocked over, chairs, broken glass, you name it.
A violent struggle.
Violent struggle that had to have taken place. And then and at some point, the fight was inside of the bedroom. And again, in there, the bed in total disarray. There's clothes and furniture strewn about. There's blood, high velocity blood inside of that place. There is a iron that
a clothes iron,
electric clothes iron that we discovered that had blood and hair fibers on it, and the victim came to rest, sort of kind of halfway on the bed, halfway out of the bed, of what appeared to be her own bedroom.
Okay.
She was nude. She was. You can tell she had from the bruises on the contusions on her body. She looked like she had been in a violent struggle, a very violent struggle.
Okay. So the iron. Do you think that was the thing that incapacitated her? Because it sounds like she was holding her own and giving this guy all he could handle. And was the iron, which y'all believe, the turning point? As you say, an opportunistic moment. He found something to use.
Yeah, he found what we call a weapon of opportunity.
So he didn't anticipate this type of struggle, and he probably was challenged more than he thought he would be. So he didn't need to bring weapons because he thought obviously that physically he was able to subdue his people. But this wasn't the case here.
And as we did the victimology on our victim Murray Pace, which simply means we went out and collected data on who she was and what type of person our victim was, and what type of lifestyle she lived, and we determined from just about every one of her close friends that Murray Pace was a fighter.
Okay.
And so
Sounds like
what we saw inside of that crime scene was indicative of what we were told by her friends, that she was a very nice person, but very athletic, and very much a stand up for myself kind of person.
Okay.
And so this crime scene was very evident that on that particular day, when she was attacked inside of her own home, she fought until her last breath.
So, John, was there anything of evidentiary value that led y'all to any conclusion regarding this particular murder?
Yes, Tim. So through our crime scene and information, collection of data, and more specifically, collecting what we believe that to be possible a DNA evidence. That evidence was subsequently sent to a lab, and we discovered there was an unknown profile on the victim's body and inside of the residence, a male profile.
So, unknown male profile. So we're going to conclude this portion, part 1, and we want you to tune in to part 2 of Big Head on the Block's podcast regarding these serial killers to determine who the perpetrator was. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Big Head on the Block. I'm Tim Henderson, the host. I look forward to dropping another podcast soon. Please give us any comments, likes, dislikes, or any topics y'all would like to discuss. Thank you.